Sophie stood in her small kitchen, the faint scent of burnt toast wafting through the air. She glanced at the clock, her heart racing. It was nearly time to pick up Lucas and Mia from school, but the bills piled on the table reminded her of the tight budget she had to manage. As a single mother, every day felt like a balancing act, trying to make ends meet while giving her children the love and attention they deserved. Outside, the sun shone brightly, and she could hear the laughter of children playing in the neighborhood. Lucas and Mia were out there somewhere, their joy echoing in the warm air. Sophie smiled at the thought, but the weight of financial insecurity pressed heavily on her shoulders. How could she provide for them? Suddenly, her phone rang, breaking her from her thoughts. She picked it up, her heart racing as she answered. "Hello? Hi, is this Sophie?" A cheerful voice asked. "Yes, it is. This is Olivia from the charity organization. We have a temporary job opportunity at our upcoming event. It's at a mansion, and we could really use your help." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. A job meant money, but the thought of working in a mansion filled her with dread. The world of the wealthy felt so far removed from her own. What does it involve?" she asked hesitantly. "You would help with setup and serving food. It's only for a few hours, and we pay well," Olivia explained. Sophie hesitated, glancing at the kids' drawings on the fridge. They needed her. "Okay, I'll do it," she replied, trying to sound confident, even as doubt crept in. Later that week, Sophie stood outside the grand mansion, her heart pounding. The building loomed over her, extravagant and intimidating. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the reason she was there. As she entered, she was greeted by the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses, a stark contrast to the quiet struggles of her own home. Inside, Ethan sat at a lavish table, surrounded by friends. He took a bite of gourmet food, his laughter ringing out, carefree and unburdened. The opulence of the mansion felt surreal to Sophie, who worked hard to provide even basic needs for her children. She watched as Ethan and his friends joked, their lives filled with privilege she could hardly imagine. "Look at her," Ethan said suddenly, pointing at Sophie with a smirk. "Do you think she even knows what a real meal is?" His friends laughed, their voices echoing in the grand hall. Sophie felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She was not just a face in the crowd, she was a mother trying to make a better life for her kids. "Excuse me?" she managed, her voice trembling. Ethan's eyes narrowed, and he leaned closer. "Seriously, do you think you belong here?" He laughed again, but this time it felt cruel. Before she could respond, Sophie accidentally bumped into him, sending his plate crashing to the floor. The sound echoed through the room, and all eyes turned toward them. "Oh, great! Now you've ruined my dinner!" Ethan shouted, his voice rising with anger. In a moment of spite, he pushed the remnants of his food toward her, a look of disdain on his face. "Maybe you should get a real job." Tears welled in Sophie's eyes as she stepped back, humiliated. She turned and walked away, her heart aching. Ethan stood frozen, confusion and guilt swirling within him. The laughter around him faded as he realized the impact of his words. As Sophie left the mansion, she wondered how someone could be so blind to the struggles of others. Ethan, still in the lavish setting, felt a strange heaviness settle in his chest. For the first time, he had encountered the raw emotion of someone suffering, and it left him unsettled. What had he done? In that moment, the worlds of Sophie and Ethan collided, leaving a mark on both their lives, one that would lead to unexpected revelations. The charity event buzzed with laughter and chatter, the air thick with the scent of expensive food and floral arrangements. Sophie stood quietly at the edge of the room, her heart racing as she tried to blend in. She wore a simple dress, one she had bought on sale, and she felt out of place among the elegantly dressed guests. As the night went on, Sophie was assigned to serve drinks, carefully balancing trays of sparkling water and juice. She watched the guests enjoy themselves, their laughter ringing like bells in her ears. Just then, she spotted Ethan, the host of the event. He moved with confidence, laughing with his friends, his expensive suit fitting him perfectly. Sophie took a deep breath and tried to push her nerves away. She needed this job, and it was only a few hours. But as she approached Ethan with a tray, their eyes locked. For a moment, Sophie felt a strange mix of curiosity and anxiety. "Hey you, what are you doing here?" Ethan asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Sophie blinked, taken aback. "I'm just serving drinks, sir. It's part of my job." Ethan smirked, glancing at her attire. "I can see that. You know, it's a charity event. You could have at least tried to look presentable." His words struck her like a slap. Sophie felt her cheeks flush as she fought to hold back tears. "I'm doing my best," she replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your best? Really?" Ethan laughed, a cruel edge to his voice. "You should have thought more about your appearance if you wanted to be here." Before she could respond, Sophie accidentally bumped into him, causing his plate to tumble to the floor. Food splattered everywhere, and the laughter around them stopped. All eyes turned to them. Ethan's face turned red with anger. "Watch where you're going!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the silence. In a fit of rage, he pushed the remaining food from his plate towards her. "Here, take it all. It's not like you can afford a real meal anyway." Sophie's heart sank, and tears filled her eyes. She turned away, unable to bear the humiliation. "I'm sorry," she muttered, trying to escape the scene. As she walked away, she could feel Ethan's gaze on her, a mix of confusion and guilt slowly washing over him. He had never encountered someone like Sophie before, someone who didn't fit into the mold of his privileged world. Her sadness lingered in his mind, a feeling he couldn't shake off. In the quiet corner of the room, Sophie wiped her tears, feeling the weight of shame pressing down on her. She had come to earn some money, but instead, she felt small and invisible. "Mommy, are you okay?" A voice called from her phone, pulling her back to reality. It was a message from Mia. Sophie forced a smile and responded, "Yes, sweetie, just a bit tired." Meanwhile, Ethan stood frozen, replaying the moment in his mind. He had been so quick to judge, so careless with his words. For the first time, he felt the sting of his privilege. Who did he think he was, belittling someone like Sophie? "What's wrong?" one of his friends asked, noticing his change in demeanor. Ethan shook his head, still lost in thought. "Nothing," he replied, but it was a lie. He couldn't shake off the image of Sophie's hurt expression. As the night continued, the laughter around him felt hollow. Ethan realized he had crossed a line, and he couldn't help but wonder, what had he done? The world outside his mansion felt different now, and the walls he had built around himself began to crack. In that moment, a seed of empathy was planted in Ethan's mind, one that would grow and change him forever. He did not fully understand it yet, but the encounter with Sophie had opened a door to a reality he had never truly seen. Ethan sat in his room, the sounds of laughter and music from his friends fading into the background. His mind was elsewhere. The memory of Sophie's tear-filled eyes haunted him. He replayed their encounter over and over, trying to make sense of why it affected him so deeply. "Why do I feel so guilty?" he wondered aloud, frowning at the ceiling. The laughter of his friends felt distant, almost like a world he no longer belonged to. He glanced around his room, filled with expensive gadgets and clothes that screamed privilege. Yet, for the first time, all of it felt meaningless. "I never thought about how my actions affect others," he muttered, realizing that he had lived in a bubble, unaware of the struggles around him. "Ethan, come back and join us," one of his friends shouted from downstairs, but Ethan shook his head. He needed time to think. He picked up his phone and stared at it, wishing he could reach out to Sophie. "I have to apologize. I need to make this right," he said, determination growing inside him. Ethan spent the next hour scrolling through social media, searching for any clues about Sophie. He found her name and a few posts that showed her with her children, Lucas and Mia. Their smiles stood in stark contrast to the pain he had seen in Sophie's eyes. They look so happy together, he thought, feeling a tug at his heart. Finally, he decided to step outside. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. He wandered through the streets, asking neighbors if they knew Sophie. "Excuse me, do you know a woman named Sophie? She has 2 kids?" he asked an elderly lady watering her flowers. "Oh, Sophie, she lives just down the block," the lady replied, pointing. "Such a sweet girl, hardworking too." Ethan felt a mix of relief and fear. He was closer, but what would he say to her? As he approached her house, his heart raced. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Moments later, Sophie opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness. "What do you want?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively. I came to apologize," Ethan stammered, feeling the weight of his privilege in her presence. "I'm really sorry for how I treated you at the charity event. I was rude and insensitive." Sophie studied him, her eyes narrowing. "Why should I believe you? You think saying sorry makes everything okay?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I know it doesn't. But I want to understand. I want to help if you'll let me." Sophie hesitated, her expression softening slightly. "Help? How do you plan to do that?" "I've been thinking a lot about my life and how disconnected I've been. I want to offer you something. Maybe a job at my family's foundation. We do a lot of community work, and I think you'd be great at it," Ethan explained, his voice earnest. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "And why would you do that? You don't even know me. I know you deserve better than how I treated you. I want to make amends, and this is the best way I can think of," he replied, sincerity pouring from his words. Sophie looked away, her thoughts racing. "You think it's that easy? Just because you have money, you can fix everything?" Ethan nodded slowly. "I know it's not that easy, but I want to try. I want to learn about the struggles people face. I want to be better." She met his gaze, searching for truth in his eyes. "You really mean that?" "Yes," he said firmly. "I want to be a part of the solution, not just an observer." After a long pause, Sophie sighed, her defenses wavering. "I don't know. This all feels too sudden." "I understand," Ethan said, his voice gentle. "Take your time. I just want you to know I'm here if you need anything." With that, he turned to leave, a sense of hope lingering in the air. Sophie watched him go, her heart conflicted, yet curious. She felt a flicker of something new, a possibility for change, not just for herself, but for Ethan as well. Ethan stepped out of his house, determination guiding his steps. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. He felt a weight in his chest, a mix of guilt and urgency. He needed to find Sophie and make things right. As he walked through the streets, Ethan asked several people if they knew where Sophie lived. Some shrugged, others turned away, but he persisted. Finally, an elderly woman with kind eyes pointed him in the right direction. "Just down the block, dear. You'll find her there," she said, her voice soft but encouraging. His heart raced as he approached Sophie's small home. He hesitated at the gate, remembering their last encounter. Would she even want to see him? Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. A moment later, Sophie opened the door, her face a mix of surprise and caution. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked, her tone guarded. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice steady but sincere. "I didn't mean to hurt you at the charity event. I was thoughtless." Sophie crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Thoughtless. You made a scene and embarrassed me in front of everyone." "I know," Ethan replied, his voice dropping. "I've been thinking about it ever since. I can't shake off how wrong I was. I'm sorry for everything." Sophie studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity, but all she found was remorse. "And why should I believe you now?" she challenged. "Because I want to make it right," he said earnestly. "I know it might not mean much, but I want to help you." He paused, taking a breath before continuing. "I can offer you a job at my family's foundation. It's not much, but it could help." Sophie's expression softened slightly, though she remained skeptical. A job? Just like that? Why would you do this for me? Ethan shifted on his feet, feeling the weight of his privilege. I realized I have been living in a bubble. I want to be better, to understand what people like you go through. I can't just go back to my old life after what I saw. She hesitated, considering his words. And what if this is just some charity case for you? What if you just want to feel good about yourself? I understand why you would think that, Ethan admitted. But this isn't about me. I genuinely want to help. I can't change my past, but I can change how I act in the future. Sophie looked down the street for a moment, contemplating. The thought of accepting help made her uneasy. She had always been the one providing for her children, not the one asking for assistance. What kind of work are we talking about? She finally asked. It would be part-time, Ethan explained. You'd help with organizing events, outreach, and maybe even some community projects. It's a chance to make a difference. Sophie's mind raced. Could she trust him? Could she trust a world that had always seemed so far from her own? I don't know, she stammered. You have no idea what it's like to struggle every day. Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. You're right, I don't. But I want to learn. I want to know what you go through. I want to support you, not just financially, but as a friend. Please, give me a chance. Sophie felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected. Hope. It's not that easy for me, she said. I have my children to think of. I understand, Ethan replied softly. If you want, I can meet them. Maybe you can show me your world a little. We can start there. She looked at him, searching for any sign of deceit, and found none. Maybe he was sincere. All right, she said, her voice steady. I'll think about it, but I need time. Take all the time you need, Ethan assured her, relief flooding through him. I'll be here whenever you're ready. As Sophie closed the door, she felt a mix of confusion and curiosity. Could this be the beginning of something new? Something that could change both their lives? Only time would tell. Sophie stood at the entrance of the foundation, her heart racing. She felt a mix of fear and hope. Accepting Ethan's offer felt like a leap into the unknown. The building looked grand, filled with bright colors and cheerful faces. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, ready to start anew. Ethan noticed her hesitation and approached with a warm smile. Hey, Sophie, I'm glad you came, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. I know it's a big step. Thank you for this opportunity, Ethan, Sophie replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I just hope I can do this. You can, he encouraged, his tone reassuring. We're all here to support you. Let's get started. As they walked through the foundation, Ethan introduced Sophie to the team. This is Sarah. She manages our community programs, he said, gesturing to a friendly woman with curly hair. Nice to meet you, Sophie. We're excited to have you on board, Sarah remarked with a bright smile. Sophie felt a warm flutter in her chest. Maybe this would work out after all. Ethan showed Sophie the office space, explaining her tasks. You'll help with organizing events and reaching out to local businesses for donations. It's a big job, but I know you can handle it. Sophie nodded, absorbing the information. I'll do my best. I just need to learn everything, she admitted, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Ethan leaned against the desk, looking at her with genuine interest. Tell me more about your kids. How old are they? They're 6 and 8, Sophie replied, her face lighting up. Lucas loves dinosaurs, and Mia is obsessed with drawing. They keep me busy. Ethan chuckled. Sounds like they are a handful. I can't imagine how you manage everything. It's not easy, Sophie said, her tone shifting. Some days I feel like I'm drowning, but I have to keep going for them. Ethan felt a pang of guilt at her words. He realized how much he had taken for granted. I'm here to help you. I want to understand your struggles, he said earnestly. As the days passed, Sophie settled into her new role. She found strength in her work and began to feel a sense of purpose again. Ethan made it a point to check in with her regularly, They shared lunch breaks, exchanging stories and laughter that slowly built a bridge between their worlds. One afternoon, as they sat outside in the sun, Sophie asked, "What do you do for fun, Ethan? Besides this, I mean." He paused, thoughtful. "I usually hang out with friends, go to parties. It's all pretty shallow, honestly. I'm starting to realize that I want something more meaningful." Sophie nodded, understanding. "I used to love painting before life got so busy. It used to calm me down." "Why don't you start again?" Ethan suggested. "Maybe you could even teach a workshop here. We can use your skills to help others." Sophie looked surprised. "You really think so?" "I know it would be amazing. It could inspire others," he replied, his eyes bright with excitement. Encouraged by his words, Sophie began to feel more confident. She spent the weekends sketching and painting, rediscovering her passion. With Ethan's support, she even started planning a small art workshop for children at the foundation. As their friendship deepened, Ethan noticed changes in himself. He was learning more about the challenges people like Sophie faced. He began to question his own privileges and vowed to use them for good. One evening, while they were organizing supplies for the workshop, Ethan turned to Sophie, his expression serious. "I want to do more to help people like you. I've been thinking about starting a program focused on art therapy for kids in our community." Sophie looked at him, her eyes wide with admiration. "That's a wonderful idea, Ethan. Art can really change lives." "I want to make a difference," he said, determination in his voice. "And I want you to be a part of it." Sophie smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. "I think we can really do something special together." As they continued to work side by side, they built not only a project, but a bond of trust and respect. Sophie began to see Ethan not just as the privileged boy from the mansion, but as someone who genuinely cared about making the world a better place. In that moment, with hope blooming in her heart, Sophie knew that this journey was just beginning. Together, they were building bridges, not only between their worlds, but also within themselves. Sophie stood in her small kitchen, the aroma of a simple stew bubbling on the stove. It was a meal she had learned to make with whatever ingredients she could find: potatoes, carrots, and a bit of meat. Today was special. Ethan was coming over for dinner. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, wondering how their friendship would grow after everything that had happened. As she stirred the pot, Sophie thought about how much had changed since their first encounter. Ethan had surprised her with his sincerity and willingness to help. She had taken a leap of faith by accepting his job offer at the foundation, and it felt like a step in the right direction. It was more than just a job. It was a chance to rebuild her life. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Sophie wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the door. There stood Ethan, holding a bouquet of flowers and a loaf of fresh bread. He looked different. His casual clothes seemed more thoughtful, and there was a warmth in his smile. "Hi, Sophie. I brought these for you," he said, handing her the flowers and bread. Sophie smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Ethan. That's really sweet of you." "Is there anything I can help with?" he asked, stepping inside. "Just set the table, please. The stew will be ready soon," she replied, appreciating his eagerness to pitch in. As they worked together, Sophie felt the tension from their first meeting slowly ebb away. They chatted about their days, and Ethan listened intently as she talked about her children. "Lucas loves soccer, and Mia is really into painting. They both keep me busy," she said with a laugh. Ethan nodded, genuinely interested. "I would love to meet them. Are they home?" "Yes, they should be back from the park soon," Sophie said, glancing at the clock. "I hope they'll like you." "They will, I promise," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Once the table was set, Sophie ladled the stew into bowls. They sat down, and she felt a sense of peace as they began to eat. The food was simple, but it was made with love, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter and conversation. "This is amazing," Ethan said, taking another spoonful. I never realized how good home-cooked meals could be. Sophie chuckled. You've probably had a lot of fancy dinners, huh? Ethan shrugged, his expression turning serious for a moment. Yeah, but they never felt as warm as this. As they finished their meal, the sound of children's laughter filled the air. Lucas and Mia burst through the door, their faces lit up with joy. Mom, we're back, Lucas shouted. Guess what, guys? I have someone special to introduce you to, Sophie said, motioning for Ethan to stand. Who is it? Mia asked, her curiosity piqued. This is Ethan. He's my friend, Sophie replied, watching their reactions. Hi, Ethan, Lucas said, extending his hand. Do you like soccer? I love soccer. Maybe we can play together sometime, Ethan responded, shaking Lucas's hand. Mia, still shy, peeked at Ethan from behind her mother. Do you like to paint? She asked softly. Ethan smiled, kneeling down to her level. I'm not a great painter, but I'd love to see what you create. Maybe you can teach me. Mia's eyes sparkled with excitement. Okay, I can show you my drawings. Sophie watched the interaction with a sense of joy. It was a beautiful sight to see her children connecting with Ethan. She felt a warmth spreading in her heart, realizing that this friendship was becoming more than she had ever expected. As the evening went on, Ethan shared stories about his life, and Sophie felt comfortable enough to share her challenges. I never thought I would be in this position, she admitted, but I'm trying to make it work for my kids. Ethan listened intently, a newfound respect for her resilience growing within him. You're doing an amazing job, Sophie. I admire your strength. Sophie smiled, grateful for his support. Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot. After dinner, as the children played in the living room, Ethan turned to Sophie. I want to help more. I've been thinking about ways to use the foundation to support families like yours. There's so much I can do. Sophie's eyes widened, touched by his commitment. You don't have to do that, Ethan. Just being here is enough. But I want to, he insisted. I feel like I've learned so much already. I want to make a difference. As they continued to talk, Sophie realized that this was not just a new beginning for her, but for Ethan as well. Together, they were breaking down walls and building bridges, creating a friendship that could bring hope to both their worlds. The evening ended with laughter and warmth, and as Ethan left, Sophie felt a sense of gratitude. Change was indeed possible, and it all started with understanding and empathy. Share this story if you believe that friendship and connection can transform lives. Leave a comment about a time when an unexpected visit changed your perspective, and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.